Hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and in today's video we're going to be talking about yet another mystery of our universe about which we know almost nothing. This mystery is known as fast radio burst, and we have just detected yet another one. Anyway, welcome to What the Math. So I've been meaning to make this video for quite a while actually, but you know, it is very difficult to talk about and also to try to explain something about which we know so little. Now, a fast radio burst is actually a concept that was coined approximately 10 years ago when we discovered the first one completely by accident. This was actually discovered by a scientist and his student, and the scientist's name, I believe, was David Lorimer. So it's kind of unofficially known as the Lorimer event. Now, this event was discovered by sifting through basically gigabytes and terabytes of data and looking for various data on pulsars and neutron stars. So maybe we can go to one of these objects and take a look at it right now. I think one of the most famous pulsars out there is known as Krebs pulsar, and this is essentially what it looks like in space engine. Very similar to a black hole in some sense, but very different in every other sense. Now these are super magnetically charged and super powerful, extremely fast spinning objects that essentially produce lots of energy. And they're also relatively small. They're only about size of a, in this sense, a city. But at the same time, they have a mass of a sun. This is what it looks like close by. Now, we think that maybe this is actually one of the best explanations for fast radio bursts, but let's actually just explain or talk about what we know about them. A fast radio burst is essentially a burst of energy, a burst of a specific frequency of energy, specifically in this case, usually in megahertz or gigahertz range. Kind of similar to what you have in your smartphone or in your router at home, or in some cases, a microwave oven, that is. But unlike other types of bursts and radiation that we discovered, this particular event happens extremely fast. It only lasts several milliseconds, which is a thousandth of a second, and also normally happens all over the place. So it doesn't really have to come from a specific direction. It comes from all over the universe, and it also seems to occur extremely randomly. We can never predict them, and they almost never repeat. We've only detected several repeating events, or at least one that repeated several times, but even that event didn't repeat with any patterns. It just happened randomly. And so, because these events are so powerful, so random, happen all over the place, and also seem to have no known origin, in other words, I could be just looking at empty space right there, in the middle of the universe, and suddenly would be able to detect this fast radio burst for no reason whatsoever. There's no supernova, there's nothing else that we've detected in this region except for this fast radio burst. And for all of these reasons, we have basically no good theory for what they are, or really any understanding of what's happening. So today I wanted to discuss some of these ideas and some of these theories, because very recently, in March of 2018, we were actually able to discover yet another such event using a telescope in Australia that was actually looking at neutron stars and pulsars again. And this particular event, actually was 3 events, but one specifically was one of the strongest radio bursts we've detected so far. And what exactly do we think they are? Well, let's start with some of the more obvious explanations. Aliens. There's actually scientists that think these might be alien spacecrafts that are basically accelerating away from us and are launching their huge engines, and we're just seeing this. We're basically seeing kind of like a lighthouse effect of their engines passing in front of us, or essentially if a spacecraft was turning or basically moving away from us really fast but wasn't really going in a straight line, it would give us this for like a few milliseconds. And this is by far one of the most, in some sense, interesting, but at the same time, not particularly satisfactory explanations. So some scientists think that it might be a sign of extraterrestrial intelligence, and specifically their spacecraft. But this is not the explanation I'm going to focus on, and also maybe not my favorite one. As a matter of fact, my favorite one comes as a kind of a accident. Back in Australia, back in 2010, the scientists in Australia were basically looking for, well, really anything coming from neutron stars and pulsars, and once again detected several such events. And what's really, really interesting is that they even coined a term for them. They named them peritons. Now, here's the funny thing, and this is actually where it gets a little bit interesting. They didn't really consider the distance of those signals coming in, into the telescope. As a matter of fact, they didn't really expect it to come from Earth. And it just so happens, and here's Australia if you wanted to see it, and it just so happens that this particular event was actually caused by microwave ovens. It was literally people opening their microwave ovens during the heating process, and because of this, the magnetic device inside the ovens created a very interesting looking millisecond event that was very similar to fast radio bursts. And they detected at least 10 of these, but they all had Earth's origin. And these events were named peritons after a mythical creature, but it turns out that they were basically caused by the microwave inside the building. Anyway, so that's not really the best explanation. It is clearly the funniest one, but we're going to be talking about some of the other things we think might be happening here. Also, first of all, let's say we're looking somewhere right here and suddenly we detect a fast radio burst coming from this direction. What are we seeing? We're seeing an extremely powerful yet very, very quick event that lasts for several milliseconds. It is on radio frequency, so this means it's either coming from things like black holes or neutron stars, or something that is extremely powerful yet produces almost no visible energy, or produces a lot of energy that is in the megahertz and gigahertz frequency. So some scientists think that maybe, just maybe, it is actually neutron stars or magnetars that are turning into black holes, and right before they collapse into a black hole, basically right before they essentially completely disappear, they release this tremendously powerful radio burst. And this is actually a pretty good explanation, because we do have a theory for how neutron stars can turn into a black hole, but we don't really know what happens. And this particular event is actually known as a blitzer, basically when a neutron star, or in this case a magnetar, might stop spinning as fast and actually collapses and turns into a black hole. And so these events, if they do occur, might produce this type of energy. Another really interesting explanation is related to actual black holes themselves. Some scientists suggested that maybe what we're observing is basically a death of a black hole, or an explosion related to some kind of a black hole changing event. And so this might be actually the first ever, or I guess some of the first ever observations of what's known as quantum gravity effects. Basically, when a black hole sort of kind of dies and disappears, maybe, just maybe, this is what we're observing, these fast radio bursts. And a lot of the explanations actually do revolve around black holes, and another one basically kind of focuses on the fact that maybe, just maybe, if a tiny piece of matter, basically like an asteroid or a rock or a very, very small moon, fell into a black hole, this is what would happen. It wouldn't really produce a tremendous amount of energy like we observe in quasars, but instead, maybe, just maybe, it would actually produce just a burst of radio energy. In essence, this is what we might be observing. So basically, black holes producing super fast, super powerful radio energy and releasing it in millisecond periods. And because these events are usually somewhat random and also come from different locations where there's no supernova or no bright objects to begin with, maybe, just maybe, this is actually what we're seeing. It's black holes doing something. And at the same time, because they're so different, a different object falling into a black hole might produce a different type of radio burst. And if we've detected several of them coming from the same location, maybe just maybe it's several rocks, several pieces of debris falling into a black hole. So yet another relatively solid but still not satisfactory or not totally satisfactory explanation. Now, luckily for us, we might actually have an answer relatively soon, because currently in Canada there's a very, very big telescope being built called Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, also known as CHIME. And this particular telescope is essentially going to be focusing on studying things like fast radio bursts, and will most likely actually be able to explain or at least detect several of them every single day. Now, the more we find, the more data we'll have to actually study these events and understand what's happening. But some scientists suggest that there might be actually thousands of such events every day. We're just not really able to see them because we don't really know where to look, and they don't seem to be repeating most of the time, so it's hard to just catch one by accident. Well, that's kind of really it. That's all we know about them. We just discovered a new one very recently, as a matter of fact, yesterday from when I'm making this video, and this was the most powerful such event. And as we study more and more of these events, we'll maybe finally be able to pinpoint the actual origin and the location. But we know for a fact it's not microwaves inside the buildings anymore, because most of these telescopes are actually only able to detect things coming from very, very, very far away. They're not able to actually detect things from inside the building or even coming from Earth. At the same time, we also think that maybe, just maybe, it's probably not aliens. I'm just going to put it out there. Even though we would all love to have aliens as an explanation, it's most likely some sort of a natural phenomenon. But a very interesting, very random, and very hard to predict phenomenon that we can't really explain just yet. Other than that, that's really all I wanted to talk about in this video. And if you have a really cool proposition, scientists are definitely listening. Maybe if we combine our minds, we'll be able to explain all of this together as a YouTube channel / community, because for all we know, this is actually what we need. We need to all bring our minds together and try to explain what's really happening with these unusual events known as FRBs, fast radio bursts. Unfortunately, none of them are in space engine because for obvious reasons we can't really see them, and because they only last a few milliseconds. But hopefully one day we'll be able to not just see them, but also know their origin. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Come back tomorrow to learn something else. I'll see you tomorrow. Space out. And as always, bye bye.